Just start in a few more minutes. My daughter passed away, so I'm just playing this to sort of keep us filling the time until we start the class. Just another few minutes more.
لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون
Okay, welcome everybody. Sad news to give you. Essentially, my daughter passed away on Thursday of cancer in Andorra. It's a country between France and Spain. We couldn't go, of course, and luckily my daughter from Switzerland drove down there and was with the family. She leaves behind two daughters and husband, and they are, of course, dealing with this at the moment. I just thought I'd start my class today with a bit of prayer that is one of the verses of the Quran, which I read very much because it's recited very well and it's comforting to have that sound instead of just music. So with that, I'll start my lecture today, the class. Let me then bring out the other screen to share. Okay, I'll mute all of you now, and then we'll open it up again at Q&A later on. Okay, hi there, Nimi.
Hi.
I was just announcing that my daughter passed away Thursday.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You'll see the recording I was playing before you came in.
Oh.
It was Surah Yasin with a picture there next to her. Anyhow, today we're going to be talking about another game changer, and that's Xi Jinping. Now, we hear about China a lot. Well, most of it is negative reporting. But Xi Jinping is the president who rose up the ranks and made China into what it is today. And he's also sort of president for life, as it were. So we'll go into his life a little bit. And of course, all these sort of projects that he has undertaken to make China what it is today. And I think it's quite a story, of course. And the recent sort of news about him, of course, was the thing about how he met with Trump. And of course, it was reported that they got on very well. But my feeling was that here was a very seasoned politician who came up from the ranks in the hardest of environment like China. And here was Trump, who had all the privileges given to him by his father, did nothing but was a playboy all round. And Trump thought he could play Xi Jinping as well. But you can see the pictures that were posted, that Xi Jinping was all smiling, looking at Trump to see what is this character all about. He well knew that's not very much there. So it was a game that was being played, and he, I think, was smiling all the way, Xi Jinping, realizing what Trump is. So, anyhow, let's look at our agenda for today. I'm going to be talking about his early life very briefly and the vision that Xi Jinping has on both the domestic and international fronts. And of course, I've talked so many times about his projects that China has undertaken. So we'll go through that very, very quickly just to give us a complete sort of picture. Because, again, as I think I mentioned in the last few lectures going back, his vision was one of really providing the common people with some better life. That was his vision. Now, this is the same vision that all great leaders have, actually. It's not a vision where they say, well, I want to come to power to make more money or try and do something that it benefits the little community somewhere. And we have clear examples of it all over the world when power grab is made and people come in and position themselves for a life and they lead. And of course, since they have always pulled the country down. And we have clear examples, in history about this. Although for short-lived, they do sort of go around making a name for themselves by conquering countries. But then the legacy they leave behind is very, very bad normally. So it is up to ideological narratives that really survive that makes the difference. And along with the narratives, of course, what is important is, of course, the technology, the science that is, that we bring with it. Now, I mentioned narratives because narrative is one of those things that separates us. As Hariri says, he was in that book, I've mentioned this before, he said, what separates us from the Neanderthals, who were much bigger, have bigger brains and so on, but the sapiens were smaller and had smaller brains, but they overcame the Neanderthals for one reason and one reason alone, and that was because the sapiens had the ability to organize themselves. And the way that they organized themselves was through a narrative. They brought in a sort of a common understanding amongst a group of people. So it was not a question of going it solo. And if you see a clear example of Trump going it solo, make America great, and so on and so forth. So that sort of nonsense was not the basis of sapient growth. And they themselves have taken over the world from all the other species, the other classifications of humankind that developed. So narrative is something that is very important. And we use narratives also in our political life. So when somebody comes up with a slogan and say, well, I have a vision or I have a dream, it is the one that puts people together and says, yes, we accept that. We would like to be able to believe in you as well if you say that. And that is what brings the humankind together. But then, of course, you've got these narratives, counter narratives also proposed by opposition on one sort or another. But then it's up to the public, as it were, to be smart enough to be able to see who's sort of saying that they can really believe to be a good slogan or a good narrative or a good dream. But unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is that emotions get in the way and fear gets in the way. And that means that these demigods who come to give you an alternative narrative, which is very, very isolationist in a way, and saying we can be better if we exclude all the others. In other words, demonize the other. And that's the slogan that the sort of demigods come out with, saying always we are better than the others, which is of course rather sort of sorry, or not a sorry narrative, but a narrative which is a lose-lose narrative type of thing. Anyway, on to Xi Jinping. Let's see. Now, he is now president of China, and he's made himself, of course, the president for life, and we'll see how that came about. So here is a person who, as a boy, was sent to the countryside to shovel sewage, pig farm, and yet he rose to power. Now, he was sent, of course, to the countryside, despite the fact that his father was one of the important lieutenants of Mao. But when his party got discredited, his Xi Jinping's father was discredited, and of course Xi Jinping had to sort of leave the city and go and be amongst the peasants, and that's where he spent time learning about the poor people, which put him in a good stead for his future political life. We'll see a little bit more of that here. There he was born, that's his father. He was a hero, national revolutionary hero under Mao. Later on became his premier as well. So Xi Jinping was born in 1953. There he is, that's him. And later on, he became, of course, well, this is about his father at the moment. His father, in here somewhere, becomes the vice, the vice president of vice premier, and here he is. That's the father there. So in a way, what has happened is that Xi Jinping's fortune fluctuated. Up to 62, he was fine when Mao was disposed of. The vice premier, his father, was also sort of disposed of. He was removed from positions of power, and Xi Jinping had to go into the country. And that's where he stayed for a while until the, the new government came in, and his father found favor with the government again. Now, here he is sort of in Beijing. He grew up in Beijing, although he was born in a little village, but he had a privileged childhood in Beijing. I think that's him somewhere here. Until his father was purged in 1962, as I said. And then as 50-year-old, she was then sent to the remote village of Lingxiang. There he is. And this village is down here. You can see that. It's a bit far away from Beijing. That's where he was. He grew up. So again, just a few things showing his different face over there. 53, born in Beijing there, and then sent to this small little village here in interior. So in the village, he became a voracious reader, and he read Das Kapital many times. And that is something that probably became part of his DNA, because he is very much aware of what socialism is, and also had vast amount of vision to be able to see that just socialism was not going to take his country, to the destination he envisaged. So he read all these other books as well. He has Les Miserables there, Hemingway, and he also spent time getting his degree when he returned back from the village to Beijing. He did engineering, chemical engineering. So you can see, it's interesting, just an observation. Of course, you could say I'm a bit partial because I'm an engineer myself. But if you look at, engineers who come to power, they solve problems because they're trained to solve problems. And of course, he solves problems. And of course, Angela Merkel was also scientifically educated, and she is also known for solving problems. And of course, our hero, of course, Elon Musk. He's an engineer as well. So you can see engineers are determined to sort of find solutions. Now, here again, saying that this is where he was sent off. He rose to the party ranks in 2007. He was promoted to top leader and became the head of Shanghai area. Shanghai was a very important commercial town, and there he learned a lot about business, industry, and so on. So you can see he started to get groomed from the countryside, living in a village with the peasantry and so on, to then having come to the town and learning about business and how industry works, and all that with a good basic education that he had of engineering. So he gets elected to various sort of bodies. Here's the top standing committee. Once he gets elected, then of course his future is very much determined by what the policies that are adopted. And his vision, I think, was something which was adopted very, very, very well by everybody. Now, Hu Jintao, as you remember, he was the previous leader before Xi Jinping. So when he succeeded him, he took over the party leadership. Also, he became the commander-in-chief of the army and as president. And then he launched into a cleanup operation. Now, as you can see, anybody who comes into power, if they give in to the powers that the establishment is, then you can't bring about any change, because then you have to dance to their tune. So what happens to any great leader when they come in is they lead. They lead by defining a vision which they see, and they want to take the whole country along. And if the status quo people, the establishment, don't want to move, then you have to be able to sort of get rid of them one way or another. And that's what he did. What he did was introduce a cleanup operation and of corrupt charged leaders and charges that were brought against the leadership, and he got around by protecting his sort of power base by removing the people who were against him and who didn't see his vision. Another thing that he did, of course, was in order to sort of make sure that he had a good grip of power, the human rights were, of course, restricted. Even today, they are restricted. But then with that restriction, he says, look, what is important is to put food on the table, not give a soapbox for somebody to stand and espouse all sorts of dreams. So he was very down to earth in that. So he brought in a lot of economic reforms and also undertook a big sort of military overhaul, because any type of army or entity over a period of time gets set in certain ways. And then, of course, then you have the corruption slowly coming in, because once people realize that they're strong enough, then they start to sort of bend the rules. And then, of course, everybody then starts to sort of take advantage of the common man. Ultimately, this is the person who pays at the end of the day, because when people are, avoiding taxes, like Trump, for instance, he hasn't paid taxes. Or he paid $750, I think, in the last year or whatever. I mean, it's a disgrace that when you got these type of very rich people, on one hand he doesn't pay tax, the other time he says I'm a billionaire. So you can see the contradiction there. So these people, when they come to power, they're not interested in the common people. They're interested in just fattening their bank balances and doing favors to their cronies. So anyway, this was the thing with Xi Jinping. He came in, brought a lot of economic reforms, changed overall the army, so that the old ways were taken out, which didn't work too well. So he started to define China's new role internationally as well. And I think he had a good reception. because what he says helped him a lot was that he he understood what humility was living in the countryside, and he saw the pain as well of hard work. So he understood and appreciated the common man. So that humility, comes through. Even any picture you see of him, he is always, looking on with rather a serene look, or you have none of this bombastic type of rhetoric coming out of him. Now, this is the place that in the village that he used to live in. This is a house in a mountain. So very simple. You can see lantern here and some little heater perhaps. Um, so that's where he sort of picked up the knowledge about the countryside until he was 22. Then he found his father back in the beginning when the father was rehabilitated by the government. So when he was restored to power, he started to build up his own career. See, and was appointed leader, of course, as the head of the country in 2012. There he is being appointed. 2012. That's only 8 years ago. But in those 8 years, he has done China an enormous amount of good. Even if you look at some of the projects that I've talked about in the past, this huge sort of projects, which I shall just very quickly mention as we go along, as to how he managed to sort of further the grand projects with the view that China uh, has something to offer the world, apart from just getting its own people better off. Because he believes in this policy of win-win. So that buys him a lot of friends abroad. Yeah, again, this is personality assuming. This assuming nature helped him. Yeah, definitely unlike Trump, but very steely in resolve to keep power, grip on his power, and then cultivated this man of the people image, which served him well. So you can see the various sort of visions of his in power. Yeah, and he always highlighted his humble beginnings, and that has won him a lot of support in all over the country. And again, his dream of transforming the life of the poor. And so once he got his graduation, and of course with his father's connection and role in the politics, he was appointed governor of Xijing, one of the China's richest province. So you can see that with a good sort of understanding of the common man, and with a good education, and then of course he needed to understand the business and manufacturing and all the city life, which he then got to know about it first in Shanjiang and then later on in Shanghai over here. So that gave him the full, if you like, preparation to lead the country uh, in a manner which was, I feel, still not very bombastic, very measured, very long term, and realistic, and not given to sort of doing things just for the press and for the media. There is Shanghai. He was quite the experience in Shanghai as a major commercial center, which was Shanghai. Was promoted to the Politburo Standing Committee. Was regarded as a likely successor to President Hu Jintao, and was given also charge of the 2008 Olympics. You remember the Olympics of that time? It was very well organized, very meticulous. I even remember our queen parachuting from the plane. Now, naturally, somebody did that, not the queen, but there she was landing from the plane with James Bond, I think it was, into the Olympic arena. I remember that image very well. So that's all part of his contribution to opening up China and presenting China as a very important power. Okay, at 220, that's when his political career started, 2012. I mean, the major one when he became president, 2012. Elevated to the General Secretary of the Communist Party and Chairman of the Military Commission, embarked on anti-corruption crackdown. Just repeating what I've said before. So these are all the images that you can see his sort of role with that. And people um, did oppose, but the opposition was taken away on corruption charges because as any power structure, there are a lot of people who are waiting to take advantage. But fortunately for Russia, for China, this guy, honest guy, and wanted to do something for his people. These are the corrupt people. Bush, this is the Boshi lie. I think we heard in the press. There was a lot of coverage of Boshi lie because his wife, I think, had some dealing with the ambassador for foreign country, and he was governor of Chengdu province, I think. He was taken out on corruption charges, and this other fellow as well. So he knew how to exercise power, and he exercised it wisely enough to be able to, at least uh, give China a chance of making rapid progress. Because we've seen time and again, uh, unless you have a clear vision uh, and also a policy which will deliver, you cannot have that with all sorts of interruptions coming out in the way. So he knew how to play the game. So that's why I call him the game changer, along with Elon Musk and of course Imran Khan and Angela Merkel. These are all the, the great leaders of our time, who I think will go down in history as really great leaders. Then he started to sort of look outward, and he said, "But China is now in a position to sort of make itself um, uh, as part of the general world, if you like, situation." And he opened up China in the sense of him presenting China as a country who can help all other countries as well. And he started by implementing projects. Now, this is in Kenya. Now, I remember I did a project in Zimbabwe when I was doing some IT systems installation in Zambia for the aviation industry. And Chinese railways were already under construction there. And although Xi Jinping was not there at that time, this I'm talking about the 80s, 1980s, but even India was there. They were trying to sort of do some accountancy of the aviation of the airlines, Zimbabwe Airlines, Zambia Airlines, um, but they weren't sort of as effective in um, in delivering some of the much needed infrastructure that China did. So when Xi Jinping came in with all these projects underway in various parts of the world, in a way with independent sort of approach or bilateral approach. So when Xi Jinping came in, he put it all together under one umbrella, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, which then sort of came out as the New Silk Road, you remember, and I've talked about it many times. I'll just mention this as we go along. So that was the dream of lifting the people up, and then of course he talks about the China. China, he says, is really Tibet, which they have full control of. Xinjiang, they have full control of. That's where we hear about the Uyghurs and all that. Hong Kong, of course, they say it's really very much part, and also Taiwan. So sooner or later, all these will be part of China, no matter what they say today, because China says these are our original sort of, you know, country or part of our country. So in order to sort of bring about this closer understanding to the neighboring countries, uh, he initiated this Belt and Road Initiative. We've talked about that many times. Here's a little picture of that. I'll show you a bigger picture later. So his base again was to try and eliminate poverty. That's his basic slogan, his dream that he was selling to the people. And Because of that, he got 700 million people, which I've repeated many times, and you've heard me say that. So enormous amount of prosperity has come to China because of that first priority given to eliminating poverty. And they did that through a mixed type of economic model. A mixed economy means you've got state control and you've got market. So there's the invisible hand of the market. Then you've got the state control, which comes in a big way to maintain some of the big industries. So together, that has been the model that has worked very successfully for China. Call it the socialist market economy. Now, in that term, what they say about the New World Order, you remember the New World Order, I've said that many times, was the term used even by my grandfather in 1944 when he was the leader of the Indian Muslim League in South India. He talked about the New World Order. He was chairman and he was delivering speech when one of the leaders, future leaders like Jinnah, came to the city. In fact, the future prime minister came to my grandfather's house and stayed there as a guest. So these people also, in the speech that he gave, I have that term still with me, that he talks about the New World Order at that time. So that New World Order, the most recent one, is the one that was set up in 1945 by the powers that won the World War II. Of course, resulting in the UN, all the multilateral organizations, the World Bank, IMF. I've repeated that before. So that was the time, and of course the market economy. Uh, uh, that was supposed to deliver a lot of prosperity to the world, which it has done largely. But then a lot of disparity has also happened. So the rich have got even richer, and poorer a little bit poorer. So, so it has not been a most successful of formula, but it did deliver. And now what China is saying, okay, we are talking about a world order in their sense, means that they're talking about this usual thing that I keep on mentioning, win-win. And they've got an outlook which says that we want to be able to not just have the banks determine the policy. You remember when the Marshall Plan was employed in Europe to rebuild Europe, it was the Wall Street banks that prevailed upon the presidents at that time of USA to say, look, we want to be able to fund this. And at the same time, we want to be able to then position ourselves in Europe as major players as well. So it was the banks that led the policy. Here we're talking about a vision again, leading the policy. And this policy, China says, is going to come through these alternative organizations that they have set up. The Shanghai Cooperative Organization, I've talked about it before as well. I'll mention it later. The Asia Infrastructure Bank, which is funding the Belt and Road. Uh, and of course, recently they did the largest trading bloc in the world, the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic. This is a sort of a child, if you like, of the TPP. Now, under Xi Jinping, these are the big projects I just thought we might mention. Let's see how we do it for time. Yeah, okay. I think it is, let me see if I can trust my wristwatch. Okay, still got half now. So, embarking on greening the desert, and I've talked about this in one of my earlier talks. I just reminding you of that. It's going to make a big difference to China. And of course, in order for that desert to become green, they've got to reroute the waters. So the Yangtze and the Wangho, these rivers, they've got canals built up to provide water to these areas. So humongously big projects that he has supported and following through. And of course, he is also overseeing this huge infrastructure project. To just give you a measure of how big these projects are, if you look at this high-speed rail in China, it is of the order of about 16,700 miles. And if you look at the rest of the world, have hardly any. Even France, which has a lot, has only 2,000 miles. And here we've got Britain, we've got 800 miles here, our HS2 and all that. Japan has about 2,000 as well. USA hardly any. So you can see China is way ahead in terms of building very, very fast infrastructure. These are the type of trains that you have. They're building ports as well all over the Belt and Road. They call it the Pearl Necklace. And these pearls are really the ports that they, they're doing. And one of them is Gwadar. This is the highway that links the Western China to Pakistan and to Gwadar. So humongous projects. This is the rail network, and this tells you about the speeds at which they can go. The blue lines are over 300 kilometers. They're the blue lines here all over. The green ones, at about between 2 and 300 kilometers. So you can see humongously fast and good services being there. Now, why they're focused here is because that's where all the industrialization is. And this Western China, you can see, that's where the Uyghurs are. It's hardly much industry there. So that's why China is embarking on a rapid sort of program of lifting that region. And by retraining these people, of course, we call it all concentration camps and all that, but China says, no, we are retraining them to sort of have industry in the area. Now, technology is another thing that is delivering for the Chinese people. Now, if you look at these relatives, we know that the technology USA is heading the world sort of league, but here is China. See, not too far behind, and then there's India here, United Kingdom there, and Japan there. So they're pretty sort of come up very fast. And of course, I've shown you this picture before. It's the standing about cities, Shanghai, apart from Silicon Valley, which is the top, which is not here. Apart from that, there's Shanghai and there's New York in second, Tokyo, Beijing, and all these others. We have even Boston, Chicago, Berlin, Washington. I think this is UK here. Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Again, I want to show you this Belt and Road, huge project. I won't go into the detail. If you've got some questions on that, we can talk about it, but you can see how big it is. This one I talked about many times because that is going to link up all of Africa. So it's resources coming into China and goods being delivered to China. So there's a two-way type of traffic through this way. And then, of course, this blue band here, that's the water connection. That's why it's called the belt. The belt is these roads, and the roads, and the belt is the water sort of connections. And the ports, the purples are in here, in Gwadar and all this around here. A bit more detail of Europe, I'll just show you that. These are again just showing a clearer picture. This is the picture I've shown you before of Pakistan, the infrastructure projects that they have undertaken and going full speed ahead from the last report I heard anyway. That's Gwadar down there, which is going to become the deepest port in the world. And because none of the Persian Gulf ports are very deep. So this will be right next to the Persian Gulf. Yeah, there we are, Gwadar, and it'll have huge tankers coming in. They've done a deal with Iran as well, a 400 billion deal. This was just last month because of all the sanctions. Now Iran is having better days for them, one with China, and then of course with Biden coming in, they'll have better days as well. Now this I thought I might show you because another thing that the Belt and Road is this link up. Just talking to a friend of mine who said that this connection into Germany, which is the train connection to a place called Duisburg. It is a small village, but China has made that a central sort of terminus for them because that's where they bring the goods on. And of course, Dusseldorf is right close to it, and they're very worried because with China coming into Duisburg, they will be sort of building that sort of economy very fast over there. Now, another area which China and under Xi Jinping has done is Belarus. They've opened a huge industrial park there, and of course, green parks as well. And that is going to produce a lot of manufacturing for Europe. So you can see all these connections that they are making are very long-term, very visionary. This is a space program I went through. So they're in fact, they're not too far behind. They've sent off a Mars sort of probe just in June. It's on the way to Mars. They have sent a mission to Moon, to the other side of the Moon, which no other country has done. Also, recently, I think just a few weeks ago, they brought back uh, their lander, which came back with soil and rocks from China, from the moon to China. So they're not too far behind at all. And they're building their own space station. As I said, mentioned, they were kept out of the space station, but they're building their own. That's the thing there, okay. And they're building a mega city. I told you about 130 million people. It's going to be, I'm not sure if I got a picture of that. Yeah, here we are. This is northern China. Beijing is here, Tianjin is here, and Hebei is here. They're going to combine these three into one city, like this big one, that will have 130 million people and all the fastest network of connections. This is the airport there. So you can see these humongous grand things there. And of course, on the funding side, they've got these countries also participating in a big way. 68 countries. It constitutes about 40% of the GDP, and that's about $21 trillion worth of uh, economies that are participating with China. So they are going places. So they are going to be having this SCO, I told you, a bit like our G8, G7 and all that type of thing. They've got this organization, which in fact is bringing a lot of these, if you like, countries together so as to have even Pakistan and India, who don't belong to any other apart from the UN, to this group, and to make them talk and resolve problems. And of course, all the Central Asian countries as well are part of that. And I think there'll be more and more joining up very quickly. They're thinking of a free trade area, which they have already developed in that of that RCEP. Now, RCEP is being given birth by this TPP, as I mentioned before in my talks. And USA, when they pulled out, they did shot themselves in the foot, and China came in and took over. That's the advantage of having all. See what these trade organizations do, or trade deals, is that they have these common base, so that there is no particular one country that takes advantage. So you have common safety laws and environmental legislation. That's the sort of thing that we are going to be dealing with Brexit as well. Europe is asking for a level playing field, which means that we can't go around subsidizing lots of industry by ourselves, because if we do, then that would be unfair competition for the countries in Europe, and which means then there would be taxes would be imposed according to what Europe feels, that it won't be free trade and not tariff free either. So that's a big sort of thing. If you have an agreement with big blocs, it's an advantage. Now Britain has to work that out now. This is the biggest bloc. I've showed you this picture, the RCEP. Asian countries, 15 Asian countries got together with all these, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, South Korea as well. And it's called the RCEP. But India is probably on the sidelines at the moment because they're afraid that China is going to sort of be too powerful. These are the countries for that RCEP. It's the biggest trading bloc in the world. It just was agreed on in the last month, although they've been working on it for a few years to try and get all the agreement done. But because TPP was already half cooked, it was advantageous for them to start off from that. So it's a huge thing. It covers 2.2 billion, 30% of the population of the world. Huge sort of. So we're talking about big numbers when you're talking about this type of trade bloc. Now, as a game changer, I have always have a laugh when I see these pictures, all these very smiling pictures, and there's Trump there thinking he's going to make lots and lots of concessions from China, and China looking on and say, I think we got the measure of you, all right. So you can see it's Xi Jinping who's playing Trump, and Trump thinks he's playing Xi Jinping. So you can see it's a good sort of picture, I thought. Okay, we'll go on to having our stop the share here, and I'll go for the view, which is gallery view, and we'll go for some Q&A. Okay.
Sorry I was late.
No problem. Go ahead, George. Always good to have you.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to again mention that I started off by playing some verses from the Quran this just at the start. So I'll show that a bit in that recording as well, because my daughter, I mean, hardly just 53, she passed away in Andorra of cancer. And we have been really sort of, affected very much by that loss. And I just thought I'd convey my feeling a little bit by playing those verses of the Quran with a picture next to it. So you'll see that later in my recording. Okay.
So sorry.
Okay, we are having, you can unmute yourself. I'll try and unmute. Yeah, you can unmute yourself, I think. Okay, anybody with any questions? Welcome.
What do you think of China's reaction to Australia with their tariffs?
With the what, sorry?
The tariffs they put on Australia on barley, is
Yeah,
it?
something like 200% on Australian wine. I think what they do is, at the moment, you see, China is not going to take things lying down. So what it's asserting itself now is the power to be reckoned with. So when there is something that happens which they don't like, they then sort of put a bit of pressure on the other side to sort of conform a bit more. So that is what their policy is when they put in these tariffs, which can be singeing to the Australian economy, because Australia exports a lot of iron and all sorts of minerals to China and wine.
And barley.
But because they called for this thing by saying China has not really shared its knowledge about the virus and so on, they feel that they are being unjust about that, because China feels that it has done quite a bit. But they are willing to open up the investigation. I think we talked about it last time. Yeah. So that's a game that gets played by every country, actually, when it comes to trade. These are the levers that they use to try and get whatever they want. Yeah, Imi, you're saying something.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you're quite right that they've taken 700 million out of poverty, but clearly they were helped in that by globalization, and the West was sending all its business to China, so it really helped. Now, whilst they were improving and they were still poor, they were much more compliant in a way, not as aggressive as they appear to be now, as they become stronger and stronger in every respect, that suddenly the sort of, even Xi Jinping, he looks like a really kind man and he has the sweetest smile, but now you can see the real him coming out. And I don't understand why, if they are so powerful, this idea, wanting Hong Kong to be part of them and Taiwan and all the rest of it. It's interesting, there's no sort of concept of federal power or anything like that. They just want to really own it all. That's one thing. And the other thing I don't understand is, what is it when they talk about the international order? what do they really mean? Are they wanting, they've got a lot of financial and material interests in the whole world. Even I was surprised to see even in Greenland, they've got their oars in there. Is it their ideology they want to start spreading? Or, they always pretend they don't, that they're all very kind and they're just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. But we know, even starting from no one has, give you a free lunch. So clearly the Chinese are not doing this just out of the goodness of their hearts. So what is their real aim?
I think I think what they are trying to seek is a proper role in the world for them, because you remember China has not been part of really global type of, if you like, influences.
Yes.
The influences have been really the ones set up after the Second World War by these institutions, the World Bank. So even if you take the World Bank, China doesn't have much of a say in that, because the World Bank, always the head is the US, and the IMF, always the head is a European. So these powers are already entrenched and were defined. Now China, and even the space station, they didn't have a role at all. They were excluded. So China was excluded on many fronts. So now it's saying, look, because of the size of our country, of our technology, of being practically another superpower, we need to also have a voice which is commensurate with our role.
Yeah,
Uh,
but to what end, Shafiq? That's right. I understand that. But we still have this situation where, say, for example, with Russia at the moment, they put Navalny in prison straight away, and Europe and the US will protest to Russia and say, no, no, you can't do this. But China won't. It'll keep very quiet because it's if it is as powerful as it is, it can use that power for a lot of good in the whole world. And goodness knows the world needs someone, especially after Trump. They need somebody who's doing it for some right reasons. Obviously everyone's own interest is there, and
yeah,
I don't doubt that. But
their vision of uplifting their country was to start off with the idea of uplifting the poor. They
therefore,
feel that they have a role also of uplifting the poor globally as well. Since they have done it, they have, they've sent out, thousands of people into villages. They have records of, their lives over there, and they have taken decisions to better their lives, and they have worked. So they've got a model that works. So a lot of the world, poorer world especially, can sort of learn a lot. And I think a lot of people are starting to look at it. Even if you look at Pakistan, now Pakistan is very chummy and very close to China, and they feel that they will, get a good deal with China. In the same way that if you look at USA and Mexico, USA has really pulled up Mexico quite a lot in its, in its economic well-being. And the same goes for Turkey. The Turkey's well-being also, to a large extent, has been because the Europe has helped Turkey in the European Union, the common market. See, so if you're next to a country which is growing, you also grow with it. So the argument that they present is, right, we are growing, so we'd like to grow, make you grow as well with us. So they have a narrative which is good and very distinctly different from having to have bases all over the world. We've got 800 bases which are, everywhere to project power, to keep our friends in power. So you see all these despots all over the world and nasty governments that are emerging, the latest being the Modi government, who are harassing Muslims and so on. So the bases are being are there to protect your friends here. Your friends are who? You've got CC, you've got MBS, the Saudi guy, and you've got Modi now, and then you've got all these people who are not necessary, but all in the name of doing good to the country. But we've seen they hang on to power for years and don't do much. So, so I believe that China is trying out a different model, which I think seems to be working pretty well. Anyway.
Shafi, it's Mei Ling here.
Oh, hi, Mei-Ling. Good to see you.
Hi, nice to see you. As Chinese, I think I could speak for some people in China. We've been bullied around for the last 300 years. Until then, China was very much a superpower. And in a way, Chinese is saying, now we're powerful. You're not in position to bully us. And they also want to show their muscle that they are not what they were 300 years ago. They were so humiliated for 300 years with Europeans, American bully them. And it's time, and I don't blame them, although I'm from Taiwan, it's time that they say, look, we are powerful now, and you are not going to bully us around. We have our voice, we have our policy, we have our human rights. It's not up to you to tell us what to do.
Can I joke the joke while you're doing that?
Yeah, I think they are sort of filling in a way. You see, Russia used to be the other, uh, uh, if you like, when you had the superpowers battling each other. But then we found that the Russia sort of went down because first of all the economy is not so good, and secondly I think the model that they were following was not very successful. But then China, I think, has learned lessons from both Russia and from the West as to how to go about delivering a better result. And they're smart. They think long term, and I, for one, believe that they can do a lot of good to the world. Although I'm sure there will be some abuse that is going to be coming along, because if you look at the port of Colombo, they built this huge port, and then the local government can't manage it. There's not enough revenues, and they haven't been able to pay back the Chinese the money. And of course, China said, "Okay, fine, we'll take over and manage it for you," and that's how it is happening. So, in a way, I would say that China is not out there to sort of, in a way, I don't think any country apart from in the old days when you have to sort of march in and take over the country. Now it's a much more subtle type of takeover that takes place. Economic power, influence, the soft power, all that is now starting to emerge out of China, and they're not. See, their TikTok little app, which is humongously successful, is very popular with all the young crowd. When I go into TikTok, I don't use it much, but I just have a look at it now and then. It's so easy to be able to sort of put out a message. And if you look at social media, it's one of those things that is going to influence the whole world one way or another. And with technology coming in such a big way into our lives, China is emerging as a very technical savvy country. And with the type of policies they are adopting, I think even this 5G narrative that we hear, it's all in saying that they're going to steal our data and that type of thing. Well, any social media is stealing data. So this type of narrative that is put up as being sort of detrimental to using it, I think is much more to do with, if you like, economic reason rather than and political reason rather than technological reasons. So China is very smart. So if you look at Huawei, now Huawei is so advanced in their sort of network. Uh, China's utilization of IT in their lives is very extensive, much more extensive than any of the Western countries at the moment. So that is the sort of thing that they are doing, which is to surge ahead. I accept what you said earlier on, that this globalization has helped them a lot. But at the same time, not only globalization, but all the technology that was developed in the West, they have profited from. And now we have to go and start stealing their technology now, really, to sort of keep up. So we
Yes,
have
I fully agree. They were very lucky in a sense. About 15 years ago, people thought Chinese economy going to be flop. There would be, no growth that they're happy. But they're very lucky in a way. They had a Japan to follow, and they fought so hard until now to uplift all the poverty. And so they're not going to fall into the same trap that Japan did. Japan had more than 3 decades of lost prosperity. In fact, the Japanese call it the lost 3 decades. So they had that to follow. But don't you forget, I repeat, Western people think Chinese just forgotten about what the West did to them and how humiliated they were, whether it's the Opium War or, whatever it is. No, the people don't forget so easily. As a child, I'm from Taiwan. I'm not Taiwanese, Chinese. I call myself Taiwanese. That's what our history book is all about the humiliation from the West. So they're not going to easily erase that and say, right, you're quite right. You would tell us what to do with the human right. You tell us not to do this, so we're going to obey. In a way, it's. I agree what you say, but in a way, they're not prepared to take everything West tell them to do.
No,
And I do think they should.
One thing I just wanted to mention, Mei Ling, is that I'm not sure that Chinese policy is out as a revenge policy. I don't think so. I think they genuinely look at the world as having to sort of try and deal with the issues that the world faces on so many fronts in a manner which is better than what has been managed so far. I believe that's their goal.
Sure, I agree. But nonetheless, I think there is still a huge pride involved.
The memory is still there, of course. I agree with you. Memory doesn't sort of disappear. I agree with you there. Yeah, somebody else was saying something. Sorry, I interrupted them.
I wanted to ask Shafiq, I'm a bit concerned about the fact that really he is a dictator. And what he's been doing, for example, to the Uyghurs, not only that, anyone who raises their voice about any opposition to any of his thoughts, they put in detention, they're wiped away. There's a lot of opposition in his own party, and he just stifles their voices. They're too frightened to speak out. They're leaving the party. I mean, is this how we want a leader to be, a dictator in that way? I don't know. Do you not have any concerns about it?
Well, no, I agree with you. I think this is a very difficult job that one has to sort of to be able to deal with the opposition. When I look at the example, I follow Pakistan politics quite closely because Imran Khan is one of the people that I'm following closely. And because it's a democracy there, although it's different from China, China is an autocracy. So you've got in Pakistan a democracy, and therefore you cannot, in fact, just pick up people and jail them. So what is happening is that the opposition is ganging up and making life so difficult for simple sort of provisions for bettering the people. They are blocking them simply because what they are saying to Imran Khan is that you sort of write off our errors in the past and start afresh. Because he's saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hold you accountable for what you've done. You've looted the country. You have to bring back that money and you have to serve jail term. And that they don't want to do, you see. And they are messing things up in Pakistan so much simply because the system at the moment is one where it allows them to say that and buy up the press and have all sorts of counter narratives being projected. So you can make a real mess if you allow these a free hand in that sense. So China, I think, has foreseen that and says, okay, no free hand because we've got a 1.2 billion people to deal with, and we want to be able to deliver what they think is the betterment for the people. And because of the results that we have seen that China has advanced so much, it means that the policy is delivering for the people, you see.
He has. But Shafiq, what about what he's doing to the Uyghurs? He doesn't justify it. He's simply denying it ever happened, where we've got so many people and so much that's come about that we know that this is happening. And how can that be justified?
I'll tell you one thing, Giselle. We still have a press which tries to target always the other as being on the wrong side. And of course, you have the rhetoric that always builds up and say concentration camps, this, that, or the other, which is embedded in our psyche, as it were, as being very tough. So the moment China says, look, our Uyghur region, the Western China, is a very, very poor region, and they're still living in, as it were, in the past, with no economic sort of well-being come their way. They said, what we want to do is to bring in the factories into that area. And for the factories, we need to retrain the people quickly. And when they go in for retraining centers, these are classed by the Western press as concentration camps. Of course, there are anecdotal things that say one family has sort of had their child taken away and put into that camp. So we get a very negative type of reporting. That's why I keep on saying that so far China has really, lost to the Western press. And Western press, makes money out of this type of narrative that they present. So I have a bit more faith in China's sort of narrative. We're saying, look, we are trying to better the conditions of those people. And I believe that it may not be the best way that they're accomplishing it, but it's a way that's going to work, I feel.
But he's not
Shafi, I
even allowing
so
them to
agree with
practice
you.
their own religion. He's not allowing them, he's brainwashing them, and they can't practice their own religion. They're having their children taken away. I mean, this doesn't seem, it's not something small. And the people that have escaped from there, every one of them have been reporting the same thing.
Yeah.
I think can I add, I'm
Yeah,
quite cautious about.
to you, Nimi, I think you were saying something?
Yeah,
Yes,
I say if people in England or people in America tend to view China with more than 1.2 billion people as if they should run the same way as England, which has 60 million, or America, 4 times of that. You cannot root a population of 1.2 billion in the same way. And it takes time for democracy to go through until, this is the first time in over 300 years they have any kind of restore pride or any kind of democracy, any kind of wealth to sort out lots of problems. And it's going to take time. And I think people in the UK or in Europe judge China too soon.
Okay, Nimi, what were you saying?
Yes, I was going to say, I think the West hasn't done anyone too many favors, because the whole time they've been advocating democracy. Fine, that's a certain system, but it's very easy to talk about democracy and then you say, oh, India is the biggest democracy in the world. No, it isn't. You can only have a democracy if people are educated and they know what they're talking about. So because of this, India runs away with, and as you keep saying now, Modi's running it, there is no democracy there. But as far as the West is concerned, oh, it's this great big democracy. And I think it's very difficult for the West to be saying to the rest of the world, you do this, you do that. And especially because America is now really descending into a mobocracy, which is what the economists called it, because it's the rule of the mob. So if you have a democracy that's not working, then you've got a mob, it is the mobs who are ruling. So I think they have to be careful about that. The thing I find slightly disappointing, I think China's done brilliantly, and I think they're capable of doing much more. But what I think, and maybe it's very naive, is, okay, they have a lot of power in Africa. Africa needs a lot of help. Most of the African leaders are dictators. So if China is helping so much, why can't it actually make some rules for them so they aren't doing what they're doing to their own people? So maybe hold back your material help till those people actually, all these leaders who've been leading there for 35 years, and they don't want to leave, and they won't leave, and they steal all the money from the poor people. So that's my concern. I think if China, because it is as powerful as it is influential, but I think it needs to go about doing good in its own way rather than in the old-fashioned ways of, I think the West was very busy. What was the West doing? Talking about democracy, but selling arms to Saudi Arabia. Well, that's not helping anyone, I don't think. So I think that's my frustration with China that I don't see them sort of doing it as you say, which is all altruistic and for the benefit of the world. I think there's a bit more to
One of
it.
the biggest sort of, if you like, problems with the poor countries is their poverty.
Yeah.
And if that poverty is not helped by bringing in infrastructure and then thereafter education, then there's going to be one sort of demigod or the other who's going to take over and exploit that situation. So if China's policy is to try and encourage economic development, which I think is a good policy, by bringing in infrastructure, because you see, these poor countries don't even get the money for the infrastructure. You know, one of the things that I heard, I think it was Albania or I don't know, Bosnia, one of them, they were asked by the journalists is, you've got a highway being built, which you can't afford, and yet you're getting China to build it for you. Isn't that means that you're going to be in big debt? So the Prime Minister said, look, we've got to try and lift our region up. We can't lift our region up and open up the markets if we don't have some infrastructure. We can't, grow some food and then deliver it to the other village without a road. So we need to have that type of infrastructure for bettering our economic circumstances. Once we have that, okay, it is a risk of taking on some debt, but then that's a debt well exploited. And what China is doing is that they're not necessarily giving money so that the money then appears in the Switzerland or in Cayman Islands. They're making sure that that money is spent. So they're keeping some oversight and managing that when they make an investment in the infrastructure. So there is a little bit of a different model that is being pursued, and I feel that there is going to be some success, I think, coming to a lot of countries. That's why they have signed up, 68 countries who have signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative, which I think is a remarkable sort of achievement. You know, you need to have a narrative which people can share the world over. There has not been narrative as clear as this Belt and Road Initiative in my lifetime anyway, you know. So I feel very encouraged by that type of development and plans that people sort of can talk about and maybe participate in. Yeah, hi. Oh, again, right, Malik. Oh, yes.
Sorry, having lived in Africa for 4 years and as an Asian, I feel very strongly culturally we are so different, and it's very. It would take a long time to allow Chinese to fully understand Africans, and all the Africa know China has invested a lot of money, so on and so forth. But the Chinese don't mingle. When we were in South Africa or in Nigeria, they don't mingle with the local people because culturally they are so diverse. One is very Confucius oriented and obey the hard work, obedient, respect the elderly, so on and so forth. And in a way, it's going to take a long time for Chinese to understand, to fully appreciate Africa. I mean, it took me long time to, having lived there for 4 years, to understand why they're always sleeping. Why don't they get up and learn something, which Chinese will probably do? It's because their diet is so poor. They haven't got the energy. They've probably been walking from their home to High Commission, where Tom was working, since 5 o'clock in the morning to get there for 8:30. And so Chinese are very unsympathetic in that way, because they went through it and they don't fully appreciate the effort
The Chinese,
that Africa don't make.
see, the Chinese who are coming into Africa and even other places, they have a specific role to perform, and that is to build the projects that they're supposed to work on. I see that in the Gwadar. Gwadar was one of the things that they have, and what they have got is a separate area in the coastal nearby, which is all for Chinese. They have built their own houses, built their own thing, and they have their own little market. So there is a role that they come in to perform, not to sort of integrate with the local cultures and so on and so forth, which is a mistaken notion that a lot of people have. It's a bit like in a way, when a different country goes to another country, you maintain your habits, and I think in China's case, they've gone there to not change society culturally, but rather to sort of bring in economic well-being. Therefore, the mixing part of it, I think, is just by the way, and because they're going to stay there for a few years and then they go back home. That's their sort of way of dealing with the projects that they come out with. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh,
Yes,
yes.
can I
Ansuya.
Yeah, I was born in Africa, and I've lived there for till I was 18. And it's not a thing to say that they sleep all the time. From what I have seen of Africans, they're very hardworking. They work really, really, really hard. And we Indians were there. This is Uganda and Kenya I'm talking about. We used to see them, they worked extremely hard, which none of us would be able to do it. And yet they didn't make any progress because, when China goes to Africa and said, we'll do investment, they're not doing it for the benefit of Africans as such. There's an ulterior motive in the end. I think the Chinese, or whichever part goes there, whichever country goes, will gain more than the Africans. And the Africans, nobody has done anything to give them education. When the British were there, the African schools were not there. There were Indian schools, the English schools, everybody else. But the African kids were just roaming around. Nobody gave them education. When Kenya got independence, there were not even 5 African doctors, So
Well,
quite
I
it's
can
not,
say
it's
that
not nice to say that they sleep a lot and
No, I'm saying very often there's a good reason. Their diet is so poor because they're so poor.
because they haven't got the
They
money
have
to
to
buy
walk
food.
miles and miles to go to work, and their obligation to their family, to their neighbors, and so
Yeah,
on.
well, we all
is
have
huge.
that.
I'm
We
sorry.
all have obligations to our family. I'm sure.
Sure, but their obligation is
Let's
much
not have a
than
one-to-one like that. Let's not have that. Just make a
Yeah.
comment that you can all share in. One of the
Yeah,
things I
right.
wanted to say was that I did a project in Zambia,
Right.
and I was staying in one of the friends' houses. It was on the coast, and I took a walk in the afternoon. It was completely sort of clear, and as I approached the beach and I was watching along the beach, then there were 2 men and 1 woman, and these 2 men came towards me and pointed to this thing like that. So I said, okay, they wanted the time from me. So I said, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They shook their heads and they said, no, they wanted the watch. You see? So I got the message very quickly, and I
See
started
if you can
running.
do this,
Of course, they were not going to chase me because I was quite fast. But the point of
See if you
I'm
can do
making here
this.
is that
How many you
they're
can do?
so poor, the people.
Nothing.
It is quite quite unjust to sort of say they're like this or like that. They are poor because they don't have education. The only education they had was the Bible given to them to a long time ago, and they say, look, we got the Bible, but they took our land away. You know, so it was one of that type of transaction that took place many years ago. And that Bible, of course, wasn't going to bring them up to date on the commercial sort of needs of society. So that's something that China is trying to do, which is to uplift the infrastructure and give them a better economy. Let's hope that they will be successful. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Yeah.
Do you
Yes,
know,
George.
Africa is so rich. Do you know what? I saw one of the films yesterday about Congo. Congo has got diamonds, it's got gold, and yet the people are so poor. And I very strongly feel, and this is my opinion, that it's because they've been exploited. So they don't have decent hospitals, they don't have decent schools, you know, and yet this African country, every African country, Kenya, Uganda, you know, you can grow food, nobody needs to starve. It's so easy to grow. And yet, you know, it's just, I think it's foreign countries, whether it's China, whether it's Britain or wherever it is, don't go there for the benefit of the people. They go there for their own benefit. Therefore, the people always remain poor. That's what I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this pandemic is hopefully going to teach us a few lessons. I think we are becoming technically more savvy. I think that Africa is very advanced in terms of learning new technology. They do their business now on the phone. If they catch fish, they've got a phone and they can quickly know what the market rate is in 50 miles away. And immediately they can make a little transaction with them. You see, so they're skipping a generation or two in trying to develop. So I feel that that's one. The other thing is that Africa has the youngest population of any continent, and that is going to be an advantage for them. A lot of Western factory corporations are going there because they find the right type of staff there and workers there. So I think Africa, with all, as you said rightly, you've got all the resources there. So it will be a continent which is going to make a lot of progress, provided, of course, the right type of policies or opportunities come their way. And I feel China is one of those people that is an opportunity for Africa. Okay, how are we doing for time? We've gone well past it. Yeah. So on the clip, I'm going to sort of have a little bit of that recording that I was playing with my daughter with a few Quran verses. So you can.
Yeah, we're very sorry. Very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was such devastating news for us. Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, shall we say
Yeah.
bye
Thank
until
you.
next week? Okay.
Thank you, Shafiq.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.